So I went forward. Um, Kind of like C.S. Lewis says that, the most reluctant convert in Christianity. So I went forward saying, okay, I can't deny it anymore. I got to do it. I realized that I guess the last step has to be a step of faith, no matter how much analysis I do up front.
Mm.
And didn't know what to expect. Back to your point, I didn't know if lightning was going to strike me. I didn't know if I would hear voices. I mean, I didn't know, right? I'd never
Yeah, yeah.
been a Christian, right? I was not close to anyone who was a Christian, so I didn't know what to expect. But I went forward in faith, accepted Christ. And as I look back, it was not that anything changed in a day, right? But if I look back, when I look back at the end of 5 years and the end of 10 years, and now it's been over 20 years, everything changed.
Wow.
Right? So I
Mm.
think if I look at my ambitions, they change. If I look at my hungers, those changed. If I look at my purpose, my calling, dramatically changed. So it was no. It's not that I didn't want to make money. I did. It's not that I didn't want to do better in my career. I did, but I realized they were not the end all. Right? I realized really my calling was to remain in Him. I actually had a great family, great childhood. Uh, Grew up in a Hindu family, reasonably religious Hindu family. So I remember going to temple many times with my mom usually, and never thought too much about the fact that it was idols that we were worshiping, and
Mm.
why would we worship a God we created to begin with, right? So I didn't think that much about it at that time. It just happened to be a part of childhood, and that's how I grew up, you know. Uh, yeah,
Okay, so this is, you describe yourself as reasonably religious, kind of Indian family. So
right,
you would go to a temple. Were
right.
there relics or gods or statues or kinds of practices within your home itself that your
Right.
family did?
It's a great point. The Hinduism itself tends to be divided into four sects, and we were the Brahmins or the priests. I don't think anybody was still acting, kind of like the Levitical priesthood, I guess. But except none of us were priests. We had all become engineers, right? But that's certainly how we were born. So in Hindu religion, it's only the priests which can conduct lots of religious ceremonies. And so you even learn a different language, like perhaps we have Latin. In Christian culture, we had Sanskrit, which was the Indian version of that, I guess. And so it learned some of that. Learned a lot of traditions, I guess. um, at that point in time, maybe by the time I was 12 or 13, was already beginning to think, I don't understand the language. I don't understand why I'm doing this. But as a matter of tradition, we did things, you know. So we'd had pujas at home. You bought anything new, like a car, for example. People would actually do certain what we call pujas in a sense. I don't even know, like a prayer service. I guess you could say, um, and so that's how I was. Most people around me, and I want to say 95% of the people around me were Hindus, right?
Mm.
Maybe I knew a few Christians. Did not understand why Jesus hung on a cross. I don't think there was a church in the town we grew up in. I think there were a group of Christians who used to meet up together every Sunday morning, uh, but they used our badminton courts to do it. So we lost use of it for Sunday morning. So that's what I remembered of the church.
So you grow up in kind of a nominally religious home. Did you
Right.
ever have any doubts? Did it just make sense? Was it just kind of, this is the way the world was? We're not going to quite get to your conversion yet, but did you ever have
Right.
any doubts about it, or just this was life as was presented to you?
So there were maybe a few Muslims around us. There were a few Christians
Mm.
around us. Not a huge amount of people. So 95% of us were Hindus. So I thought, if anything, religion was cultural, right? This is how you were born. This
Okay.
is how you grew up. This is how you lived. I didn't really think of saying we could analyze religion and we could analyze God in a sense. just said this is how you live, and that's how it was at that point in time.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, when you say you were born into Brahmin, is this a part of the caste system that people are
Yes,
born into? It is. Okay.
it is. It's the top of the pyramid, if I can use that word. So it's the priests. So there's four of them. There's a priest, there's the warriors, there's the businessmen, and then there's the laborers, and we were the priests. I didn't make the step from being a Hindu to being a Christian. I made a step without knowing it from being a Hindu to being an atheist.
Oh,
And as soon as I went to college, it was an engineering college. It was called the Indian Institute of Technology, probably the best college in India. And we would keep telling you how smart we are, and if you forgot, we'd be more than happy to remind you, right? So it's kind of like the MITs or Harvards of India, essentially.
mm.
So the thing was, what I saw is a very highly technical college. It's an engineering college, and so because of that, I found everybody around me was essentially atheist, right?
Wow.
So I didn't remember actively making a transition to being an atheist, but everybody around me was analytical and the thinkers. And so the idea of God and science seemed to be two different worlds, right? And so I just naturally became an atheist without thinking about it. I did maybe evaluate Hinduism at that point to say, yeah, I don't know why I was doing it all those years. Maybe I was just a kid. I was kind of going along with the faith of my fathers, right? And but became an atheist, and maybe I enjoyed philosophy a little bit, asking some questions, but never really thought much beyond that, and say, really didn't have much time for religion once I was in college. And I saw someone who I thought one day maybe I could be like, and he was a Christian. And he made a very interesting comment saying, you can tell that the Bible is the inspired word of God, right? You can prove that's what he said. He didn't say you can tell. He said you can prove that the Bible is the inspired word of God. Now, I'm an engineer. Proof to me means evidence. It doesn't mean a
Yeah.
claim, right? And so I said, how do you prove? Right? How do you prove? Right? So then he just said something in passing. He said, look at the prophecies, and you
Mm.
start looking at the odds of prophecies coming together. And, there's lots of prophecies, of course, in the Old Testament. The one which I was super interested in was the prophecies about Jesus, right?
Mm.
So, where was he born? When was he born? Right? So we knew he would be born in Bethlehem, for example, right? Because that's where Herod sent, found out that's where he was going to be born. He would have to be born before the kingdom, the temple was destroyed. So before 70 AD, right? How he would live, how he would die, right? And especially the crucifixion account that Isaiah talks about and the Psalms talk about. I think it's 53. And so, they are talking about resurrection before the Romans had invented resurrection, right? So they're using the words the best they could to describe things which didn't exist. So it really intrigued me to say, there's something here. I don't know all of it, but there's something here. And then another friend of mine, his name is Paul, and I dedicated my book when I wrote it to Bill and Paul because they
Mm.
had such an impact on me. And Paul led me to the books of Lee Strobel,
Nice.
and I felt I had arrived. Right? Christianity is an engineer's dream, right? You can ask hard questions. You don't have to take bad answers. I could ask questions. I could dig into it, right? So then I just devoured Lee's books.
Mm.
Now, about after I'd become a Christian, he had come up with a book called "The Case for a Creator." Right, his
Yeah.
first two books are "The Case for Christ" and "The Case for
Mm-hmm.
Faith." Right, so the case for a creator. Now, in the case for a creator, he talks about a group of scientists who take a full-page ad in the New York Times saying we're
Mm-hmm.
skeptical of evolution. And he mentioned only 3 or 4 scientists' names. One of them was Dr. Fred Sigworth, whom I had met at Yale University within a week of coming to the US. Right. So
Wow.
it was like God was weaving a plan.
Hmm.
Don't know why he chose me to be part of it, but he did. And it was all starting to come together, right?
Isaiah 9:6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The book of Isaiah was among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we are certain that Isaiah came to us accurately transmitted in history, and it is calling Jesus God. God revealed in flesh, who then in Isaiah 53, 5 through 8, and of course Isaiah was written hundreds and hundreds of years before Christ came to us. Isaiah 53, 5 through 8, but he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. The Lord indeed was wounded for our transgressions. Again, the book of Isaiah, written around 800 BC. Christ is king. Every knee will bow. Absolutely.